Hello and welcome to Money Matters TV. My name is Dave Emery. I'm a certified financial planner with Planning Capital Management Corporation. I'd like to also welcome my co-host, Doug Hepburn. Hey, Doug, how are you?
Great, thanks. How are you, Dave?
And
required disclosure you have to say?
Yeah, I do. I want to start off by saying Doug Hepburn is an investment advisor representative offering securities investment advisory services through Cetera Advisor LLC, member of FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other entity. So welcome, Doug. And I just want to mention you're also with Hepburn Financial Advisors. I forgot to plug you there. So
thanks.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. We've had a lot happen in the last month.
Absolutely.
As I'm sure you're aware, the last time we were together, we were talking about, some of the economic insights that we had and had heard, and they were suggested that we were going to see interest rates rise, that the Fed was projected to increase interest rates, I guess, in June after their June meeting. Well, that's all changed now. They're talking about quantitative tightening and actually raising interest rates in March. So, as you can imagine, that's put the markets into a little bit of a tizzy.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel that for 2022, there's going to be some volatility. We've already seen it so far year to date. And I do think the economy is going to continue to grow. It's just not going to grow. Markets grow as fast as it was in 2021.
Exactly. And that's what a lot of analysts and economists are projecting. We've seen, as you alluded to previously, the Build Back Better is probably dead. At least that's what Joe Manchin says. And so, with the reduced fiscal stimulus and potentially reduced monetary stimulus, we're going to see things slow down. Add to that the inflationary pressures caused by supply chain disruptions, and companies aren't going to be able to produce as much or sell as many goods.
Right.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, even in the December retail sales, we saw a bit of a drop off in retail sales. So we're probably going to see things slow down a little bit. But as you said, I agree with you. I think the economy is slowing a little bit, but we're not headed towards a recession.
Right. I mean, and kind of you alluded a little bit to it too. I mean, one of the big areas is still on people's minds, it's in the media, is inflation. I mean, end of last year, inflation was up 7%. Consumer price indexes were up 7%. That's including food and energy. If they do not include housing. If you include housing, it would have been more than that. So inflation is definitely on people's minds, and people are feeling it. So
it's reared its ugly head, and for the majority of the population, most people, and if you look at Americans, most of them lived through the inflationary period of the 70s and the early 80s. In fact, you see some reports saying, is this Jimmy Carter revisited? And so, and the fear that instills is, people still remember double-digit inflation and double-digit interest rates when Paul Volcker raised interest rates, and drove the economy into a recession to put a stake in the heart of inflation.
Right.
And he had to do that twice. And so people aren't really looking forward to that if that happens. I think most projections are that the current Fed doesn't have the backbone to do that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like that old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess maybe I'm not sure if it's a silver lining or not, but I mean, I'll put a positive spin on inflation. So just like you do tax work. I mean, some of the indices on the tax code gets adjusted with inflation. Like the income
Yep.
tax brackets get a little wider. The 401k, you put a little more money into your 401k. There's a
And
couple of
Social Security benefits go up.
That's right.
So people like that.
Yeah.
And some will argue, and I think it's a valid point. You're better to have a little bit of inflation than deflation, because with deflation, prices are constantly going down. People are waiting until next week to buy what they wanted to buy today because prices will be lower. Well, that deflationary spiral will cause the economy to grind to a halt.
Right.
So a little bit of inflation is good, but when you get above 2, 3, 4%, now you're running into issues.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think psychologically it's compounded by the fact that if you look back over the last handful of years, we really haven't had any real inflation. So now when we have something, it feels, I want to say it feels painful. I mean, because you're not used to it, type of thing. So
right. I mean, and most people are seeing it, of course, in food and energy, which are the most volatile areas of the market. That's why they're not necessarily considered in the core CPI. Yeah. But when you go to the grocery store and you look at prices, they've definitely gone up. It's easy to see.
That's right.
And of course, you can't avoid seeing gas prices everywhere you go when you're driving in your car.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, good.
The one, I guess the biggest concern at this point is whether or not the inflation, for inflation to stick, it's got to creep into what's known as a wage price spiral, people getting paid more. And that is actually one of the things that we're starting to see now. In fact, I saw a recent article that talked about one of the big 4 CPA firms, as well as some of the big law firms, have increased their starting salaries for recent graduates. And they're also allowing people to work from home. Well, that has a twofold effect, because people are getting paid more, and now their costs are actually lower because they don't have the commuting costs, which they normally deduct anyway.
Right.
So it's, we're seeing a lot of changes happen in the economy just due to the aftermath of COVID.
Yep. Interesting. All right. Well, hey, would you like to take a question from the audience?
Absolutely.
All right. Fantastic. Armin Kelly from Philadelphia asks, what are some advantages of buying muni bonds?
That's a great question, Armin. So when people think about municipal bonds, it's usually preceded by the term tax-free municipal bonds. And the reason being is that the federal government doesn't tax state obligations of the state or municipalities. And as a result, when you buy a municipal bond or a municipal bond fund, you generally don't pay federal tax on that. You may hear some people talk about triple tax-free, where those bonds may be exempted from state income tax or even local income tax, depending on whether your locality taxes investment income or what we call intangible income. It's generally in high tax states. It's not going to be an issue if you're in Florida, Texas, Wyoming, Washington state, states where there is no income tax, but certainly from a federal perspective, those are some of the benefits. One of the keys is, what is your tax rate? Because the tax affected yield, and I know I'm probably getting too deep in the weeds here, but if the interest that you're being paid on a tax-free basis is higher than what you would get on a taxable bond with the same risk, now you're ahead of the game. If it's not, you're behind. Now, with all those advantages, there's always going to be risks, and there's going to be things to consider. So with treasuries, they're virtually risk-free because the federal government's never defaulted on its debt. When you buy municipal bonds, they're backed by the issuing entity, whether it's the state or municipality. They generally come in two flavors: general obligation bonds, which are backed by the taxing authority of the jurisdiction, or what we call revenue obligations, which are backed by the enterprise, like the Turnpike Commission or the water company, water treatment plant, something of that nature. And so there are two sides to that coin. Some people feel more comfortable with general obligation bonds. Other people feel more comfortable with revenue bonds. It's really it's buyer beware. You have to do your due diligence. And each of these bonds are not uniform like treasuries, where they have a certain interest rate and a payment date, and you know what you're going to get. A lot of them have a bond indenture that is specific to that bond. So talk to your financial advisor. If you're interested in municipal bonds, tax-free municipal bonds, make sure that you do your due diligence before you buy anything. The other thing is that, and the reason being is because, unlike the treasury market, which is very liquid, and you can buy and sell treasuries every day, tax-free municipal bonds are not as liquid. So if you buy a tax-free municipal bond, it may be a week or two before you find the right buyer for that bond if you decide you want to sell. So, again, do your due diligence, make sure you're comfortable with the risks associated with it, and that you're being fairly compensated on an after-tax basis for the risks that you're assuming.
Great answer, Doug. I appreciate it. So here's how to send in your questions to Money Matters TV.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
Well, welcome back. We have a very interesting guest here. Guest's name is Arlene Rosen. She has designations LMFT, CSAT, and she's with the Center for Healing Self and Relationships. Welcome, Arlene. Nice to see you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, great. Well, let's start off by kind of give us a little overview of you.
Great. Okay. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex addictions therapist, discernment counselor. I'm a collaborative divorce coach and a mediator.
My goodness, you wear more than one hat, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
well, that's great. Well, kind of tell us a little bit about some of the clients and what are on their minds these days. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so we have at the Center for Healing Self and Relationships, we see a wide variety of presenting issues. We have a specialization in compulsive sexual behavior, betrayal trauma, restructuring families, but we also see, your generalized anxiety and depression, or just, your typical life cycle issues that people would come to see a therapist for, including money and marital relationships,
That's so surprising. Say that jokingly. No, I think, as I'm sure Dave can attest to, anytime you work with clients, usually the taxpayer and the spouse have different concepts of money. But I know COVID has really changed everybody's world in the past 24 months. How has it changed your world and the counseling that you do?
Yeah, well, it has really been a pretty significant shift. One of the major shifts has been all your therapists needing to be able to conduct virtual sessions. But people are really struggling. Even 2 years out, people are struggling with re-entering, what this is going to look like for them, their families, a lot of isolation, a lot
Right.
of struggles with just reconnecting. It's been pretty difficult.
Yeah, I think everybody. I mean, I think everybody's feeling that. I know. I've definitely. I need to get out of my office and see some people. I mean, it's just so I can imagine that you've probably seen quite a few people come in, because this whole being in lockdown through COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been pretty difficult for people.
I've heard.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt. I've heard from college students that after being virtual for a while, and this is probably true with elementary, middle school, and high school students. After being virtual for a while, going back, they have social anxiety because those social skills that they had sort of atrophied at home, and now they've got to go back and sort of relearn how to communicate with people and pick up on nonverbal communication. One of the things you mentioned in your introduction was discernment counseling, and it sounds really interesting. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, I'd love to. Discernment counseling is a very brief model, 1 to 5 sessions, to help couples who are on the brink of divorce. And what it is, it's very structured on which path the clients are going to take. Are they going to stay in place as they are, doing the same kind of dysfunction that's brought them to my office, or are they going to get divorced, or are they going to commit to 6 months of intensive counseling? Now, the gentleman who created this model, he was pretty intuitive, because what you understand when you're doing marriage counseling, if one person has a foot out the door, or they're really struggling with the idea of getting divorced, you really can't do marriage counseling.
Right.
Because you don't have that commitment. So the discernment counseling offers us an opportunity to be able to really identify which way the relationship is going to go. If the family decides, if the couple decides that they want to get divorced, I'm also a collaborative divorce coach and a mediator. So one thing that I do have the opportunity to do is really talk to them about some alternative dispute resolution processes, so that they can continue to have a voice in the direction that their family is going to go, so that they can still be great co-parents. And yeah, it's a good opportunity.
So to kind of finish up that discernment topic, how many people, do the majority of the people come into you regarding divorce, or how many come in to do discernment, I guess is what I'm trying to ask. I mean, is it a large percentage or not?
Well, I think it's funny, because you can almost set the calendar. Now I'm a little busier with discernment counseling once the holidays, we're done with the holidays, and we've gotten through that.
It's interesting that you say that, because I heard I was listening to a podcast where somebody had mentioned, a divorce attorney had mentioned that the number of new clients spikes right after summer and right after the holidays. People go through a period where they're with their family, and then they say, you know what, that's it, I'm done. It's time to make a New Year's resolution.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think it's, if you think about children's schedules or what they're looking forward to, that's something that I hear frequently, is we want to wait until the holidays are over, or this batch of birthdays are over. But it's such a hard decision for people to make.
And it sounds like discernment counseling is really, it's a compressed process to make the decision, right?
Right. And even giving people the language that, it's almost freeing to know that if you decide to stay in place and not make a decision, that's actually a decision also.
Right.
So, giving people the opportunity to go through the discernment counseling, and if they do make the decision, to do the 6 months of intensive marriage counseling, their feet are there. They've made a commitment to really give this a try. So they have that vested interest.
And that makes a lot of sense, because oftentimes, when you do have couples that are having marital issues, there's usually some sort of issue that's been festering for a while. They haven't communicated for a while. Going in and being able to talk about that allows them to work through those issues and make decisions in a logical fashion instead of being trapped in the emotions of it.
Right.
But I'm curious, we talked about this earlier, couples having money issues. And, I try and explain it to my clients by saying, everybody has a different concept of money. And so it's important to be on the same page. What sort of money issues are people coming to you with, and why is money such an issue for them?
That's a great question. I love talking about it, not because it's such an easy topic for me to talk about personally, but the idea that we all grow up in families that have different relationships with money. And then we go into our marriage thinking that everything is going to be fine and easy. And then, it's not. We get, you have, especially when you start having children, if somebody decides to not stay in the workforce, or their income has shifted, there's power imbalances embedded. So if you don't have, I think a few things should be given to, some pamphlets should be given to people with they're licensed with their marriage license. One is have good, hard conversations about money, but it's not easy. And work hard for the marriage. Once you have children, people start not attending to the marriage, just having the expectations that everybody's going to grow in the same way, whether it's around money or parenting or what the goals are. So,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you're almost merging two different philosophies, and instead of it becoming a battle, there's got to be some sort of agreed upon direction.
Right. So if you think about the underpinnings, right? How did you observe your family, your parents, dealing with money? How did they talk about it? Did they talk about it? Did they talk about budgets?
Right.
Or was it a secret?
So it seems like money is definitely a huge topic that people come to you, pertaining around when they're considering divorce. Are there other areas regarding divorce that other issues, underlying issues that come to the surface other than just money, or is it pretty much always just money?
So no, when we're talking about divorce, there's so many issues. There could be infidelity or sex addiction or substance abuse, or they just haven't come together. They're just not connecting in the way that they used to. Different expectations. There's so many issues that could bring a couple to the place of discernment, or, is this really what we envisioned? I think amazing things can happen in couples counseling when people I've seen it, where people were really on the fence and wanting to get divorced or in trouble, and then really committed to working together. Like amazing things can happen in restructuring how you're going to think about being together and doing individual work, and really understanding what you bring to the table.
Right.
It's really easy. It's easy to point to your partner and say, this is where, you do this and you do that and you don't clean the dishes. But really, what is it about yourself that's creating the dissonance?
Right.
It's interesting.
Right. And I think you used a very important word there, which is commitment. I mean, both parties have to be committed to coming to a resolution, and not only looking at themselves, I guess, and their own behaviors, but also as part of the marriage.
Mhm.
to try and resolve those issues.
Right. And it may not be that they stay together.
Mm-hmm.
Part of their resolution may be, or their understanding is that they need to do something different and it's just not working. So one thing that I really strive to help clients understand is that there's other ways to do it other than litigation, where somebody is going to be making a decision for you.
Right.
So if somebody is in a position where they're deciding to get a divorce,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to talk about how you can do that with a proper team around you,
Mm-hmm.
with your CDFAs, certified divorce financial analysts, your attorneys who are really invested in alternative dispute resolution processes, and also a mental health professional who's a divorce coach that is trained.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more. So I think what you're talking about is collaborative. Maybe you could fill that out a little bit. What so there's what is a collaborative divorce? What does that look like?
So a collaborative divorce is a divorce process that is an out-of-court process. And the key piece is that the people sign a participation agreement stating that they will not litigate. And the participants in the team are two attorneys who have been trained in collaborative process, and a financial neutral, and a collaborative divorce coach who is a licensed mental health professional. And the team helps the people in real time make the decisions that's going to be best for their family, so that when the marital settlement agreement is done, the divorce decree is signed, the people can still interact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they can still live a life, and their children are healthy, because the outcomes for high conflict divorce and high conflict marriages are similar, as well as low conflict marriages and low conflict divorces, because then you're taking the children out of loyalty binds.
Right.
There's
That
a lot.
makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
I mean, as soon as everybody puts down the baseball bats and clubs and sits down at the table and starts talking, then you can get things resolved in a more cost and tax efficient way.
Mm-hmm.
Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
No, exactly. But I do think in some ways it's difficult. Not in some ways. It's difficult. It's difficult to sit with somebody who you've had all these plans and hopes and dreams, and then it changed.
Yeah.
People aren't showing up in the way they were.
Right.
Well, it's been a great conversation. So we're coming here to, kind of to the end here. So Arlene, is there like one more point you'd like to, anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to share before we kind of wrap things up?
If you have any questions about anything, you can certainly reach out to me and get more information about what we spoke about.
Yeah.
I think in these times, it's important to ask for help.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Unusual times.
Well, fantastic. Well, I think you shared a lot of great points, today, and I'm sure that our audience will find it very informative. So I really appreciate you coming on. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Glad to have you. So our next guest, for next week's guest, her name is Donna DeCarcio. She's from the School of Entrepreneurship at Drexel University. So make sure to tune in for that. And thank you for joining us at Money Matters. Remember, this is where your money matters.